Exciting times as we get closer to the Japanese Grand Prix. We're just hours away and we have our first big upgrades of the year. These are quite significant upgrades and a lot of pictures to go over. It's very exciting and aggressive development by these teams. And some quite surprising changes that we have to go over. If you guys do enjoy these upgrade videos, please go ahead and like and subscribe if you are new here. It would mean the world for me. We're actually killing it on the channel. We consistently do, and thank you so much for the support. It's actually unbelievable. Let's get started with the Suzuka upgrades. We always start off with the rear wings, going over what every team is running here. So let's go over Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes, and McLaren. When looking here, you can see differences between specifically the Red Bull. To me, the Red Bull, looking at it, it's a bit of a more lower downforce wing. Ferrari is kind of in that same boat as well. They went with medium low, while Mercedes and McLaren have a medium high downforce wing. Red Bull has a pretty significant upgrade here. Ferrari has also brought something to the rear of its car, and they really haven't been changing up this wing. We thought we were going to get changes in Jeddah, got nothing really in Jeddah as well. It's been the same wing that they've been using since Bahrain, that medium downforce wing, straight up in the middle. But a good thing to note here for these teams and what's going to keep going on even in 2025 is while these floors are getting upgraded, those rear wings will be a little bit more or less important because of the downforce levels mainly being predominantly in the floor and it being a bigger focal point for the future. Obviously, that is where most of the downforce is generated, and these teams have a lot more data, so they don't need to rely as much on their rear wing when it comes to downforce. Mercedes is a team that still struggles with this desperately when it comes to the downforce in its rear wing and needing that as a handicap to the car because it lacks so much rear downforce. McLaren is also struggling with drag in its rear wing, so we'll continuously see changes for the McLaren in the rear wing department. The next four teams are Aston Martin, Sauber, Williams, and Racing Bulls. Aston Martin has a high downforce rear wing, if not the highest here on the grid. Now, they also have huge upgrades here that are very significant. This could be for tire wear purposes if they went with a higher downforce rear wing in comparison to others. Their high speed has been much better this year. They're still not competitive with, in my opinion, with the Red Bull. Ferrari still has really strong high speed as well, and the Haas is actually a pretty hefty car in high speed, so they're probably relying on the tire wear to get them past this Grand Prix. We've seen this compromise happen here before at the Suzuka track, so we'll have to see what Aston Martin is going for here and why they went with a higher downforce rear wing in comparison to everybody else. The Sauber team is pretty close on rear wing downforce. It's closer to the Aston Martin than anybody else. Williams is at a medium downforce, and so is the Racing Bulls. They've used 3 different wings so far in our first 3 Grand Prix, and they've used one of those rear wings, which I think it is the one from Australia. And they do have upgrades to their car that we have yet to see. Supposedly a new floor is supposed to be here. Racing Bulls has been quiet about what it's been touching up to its car and so on, and not really showing it off up until we go into Grand Prix. Not sure why, but nobody really captures a picture of it up until then. Last 2 teams to go over are Haas and Alpine. Alpine has a medium downforce, and Haas is more lower medium downforce, at least looking at it from this angle. Haas has also said that upgrades should be coming quicker to the car, which is quite exciting. And Komatsu has been very adamant that the team is pushing these upgrades to go forward and bring the car more alive, as it is a very good car in the race, and they kind of lost that quality pace, but obviously they're a much better car in the race, which is the more important day. Now let's go over some of these upgrades. As I said, for the Ferrari car, off of quick glance, when you look like this, nothing has been changed off of just the eye view. And it is supposedly in the rear part of the car. The floor is the same, engine cover is the same. It could be a slight change like they added last time. Some of you guys even pointed out, and it's unbelievable that you guys caught this, was that there was a little wing added to the exhaust area outside of the engine cover to try and optimize that airflow more towards the rear part of the car and towards that beam wing. That was an upgrade to the car, but nothing quite significant. As I said, they're not going to be really pushing these parts too fast, and they're trying to optimize the base of their car. The base of their car is pretty much perfect right now, and to mess with that with slow upgrades, it's better to bring a big aggressive upgrade, which is what they're planning for Imola. So we're not going to see big changes. They did say that there should be a change in the suspension. When I look at it, you really can't catch anything. It's supposed to be in the rear suspension, adding an arm or changing the way that it was set up. that is something to look out for in the weekend. The worst team on the grid, Alpine, has actually finally brought a upgrade. They're a team that through this regulation period has been really pushing for this aggressive front wing setup towards the middle part of the front wing, where they've done different types of cutouts, seen what's been working, and now they've finally shifted to the more Red Bull dominated setup in the front wing. Their front nose still goes down to the bottom, so they still have that big F2 looking nose. That hasn't changed on the car, but the actual front wing layout, promoting a lot more outwash than the other front wing did, has now finally changed. How much of an upgrade this will be? With what Red Bull said last year, these front wings only bring you between a tenth or two, but it does optimize the way the airflow is going throughout the car, so that is important. But a lot of the air is going through the underfloor, so that is the most important part on the car. But this Alpine needs everything it can get, honestly. It's just a very slow car. Hopefully helps them with their understeering problem, because that's going to be a big issue for them here in the Japanese Grand Prix. Another interesting thing to know before going into the huge part of upgrades is that Mercedes brought back the floor that was originally brought into Bahrain after testing, rather than the floor they ran in Australia. So this is going to be interesting to see what happens. Lewis Hamilton has literally quoted the car as going from the best car he's driven in 3 years in FP3 to the worst car he's driven in qualifying. I don't know what's going on with them. They say temperature issues, but if you've been following Mercedes, they said temperature issues in 22 and in 23, whether it's hot or cold. They're supposedly better in the rain. This car is lacking so many things. I'm not sure they know what they're doing. At this point, it's getting old with Mercedes, and I don't think that car is going to be doing much better, considering what they're saying are the solutions or why these problems are occurring for the car. It's just in a really bad state, and there aren't any significant upgrades here for Mercedes or McLaren, really. Now the AMR 24, let's talk about this car, because they've brought significant changes, actually bigger changes than I thought they would bring. We heard that they would bring a beam wing and a floor change. This was supposed to be up to 2/10. Well, they've brought more than just that. They've brought a bit of a different engine cover, some optimization to that cooling, and a completely different side pod. Now looking at this side pod, it's going to obviously look familiar to the RB19, especially with its inlet being as little as it is, but now having that double splitter, focusing on more airflow getting outwashed from the side of the side pod. This picture right here from Bahrain testing to Suzuka, made by AMF1 News, is a perfect show of why this solution is going to work. If you actually look at the FlowViz from Bahrain testing to Suzuka, you can see that they have that gap of where the airflow isn't being optimized, and this would be the perfect solution for that. I also do think this will help with their tire wear, as it is an aerodynamic problem. If they're focusing on more outwash going towards the outside of the car and letting the tires breathe a bit more towards the rear, where the rear is the problem, this could help them significantly. That is a main part of their problem that they're trying to fix, and they say that there are upgrades to address this issue. They do specifically state that these upgrades are going to help them tremendously here, specifically in Suzuka. A floor change has been brought to the car as well. As you can see, they do have that little gap up top that interests me. Maybe it's some part of the cooling going into there, then optimizing airflow going towards the rear part of the car. This upgrade may not look significant to you, but it shows a big change in the underfloor, of course. And Ferrari really tried optimizing this rear wing edge last year for the floor, so it is important to note that it can make significant changes, and the way that the airflow is being distributed now to the diffuser matters a lot on this edge. You can see with these side-by-side pictures how they've optimized that airflow to be more promoted towards that back and rear part of the car in comparison to before, with the little finer details. It's not a lot to notice, but another big change that Red Bull's been having on their car consistently, and finally another team has brought it, is that engine cover gap between the cannon part of the car and the side pod part of the car. I'll obviously circle it for you guys, but we've known for a while now that Red Bull is optimizing some of that airflow to the back of the car, and we have even more confirmation that that is actually a very important piece to the car, and they're trying to use the cooling as also an aerodynamic aid, just like Red Bull is doing. This is very important to look at. But speaking of the Red Bull squad, let's talk about the significant upgrade they've brought here. They've brought a change to the side pod / engine cover area, and it's nothing like we've seen before. This team is killing it when it comes to optimization of The air that is going over the car, they are optimizing it to the max. By that, they're trying to take whatever is close to that halo area, optimizing that and putting it towards the rear part of the car. They've been consistent with this. It's the same thing with the engine cover. Any of this kind of bad air that's going through the engine cover is now being distributed through cooling and towards the rear part of the car. And now we have confirmation on what that vertical slit is doing as well. Here's some better pictures of that upgrade they've brought. As you can see, it's air that's just being optimized towards the rear part of the car, air that's getting stuck maybe in between the halo section and the side pod that's going over that overcut. Here's a great picture, and also with this blue highlighted part showing you what that vertical inlet is doing. Obviously, this has to be somewhat done in the regulations through cooling. So it is cooling the inner part of the car through that side pod system, but also distributing the air back as where you can see it through that engine cover part that I was talking about, through the middle between the cannon and the actual side pod itself. And more air is being distributed towards that beam wing, giving them a faster top speed. This is something that Red Bull has just been focusing on completely throughout the regulations. That's why they've always been a step ahead in top speed. I don't even think it's really much of an engine gain. Their engine's been good, but it's been definitely Ferrari with the best engine in these regulations. Consistently, this car is bringing new innovations to aerodynamics in these regulations. It's actually crazy. They were one of the first teams to complain about that vertical inlet when Ferrari brought it back then. Some people are also saying that this halo modification that they've made with its inlet is similar to Ferrari. It's not done in that type of way. Ferrari has it in a way to where that geometry is actually helping air get towards the rear part of the car, but not through an actual inlet itself. Red Bull team continues to surprise, and I wouldn't be shocked if we see even more modifications to this. I think it's just a slight upgrade for now, but big upgrades brought here to the Suzuka Grand Prix. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please go ahead and give it a like, subscribe, it would mean the world, and peace.